All right, it's 3 o'clock or 3:30, I should say. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Dunn County Executive Committee on Wednesday, January 8th, 2025 at 3:30 PM in room 60 of Dunn County. I'd like to welcome all the executive board members. Looks like you weathered the New Year's pretty well. And I'd like to welcome anybody that happens to be watching online. I hope your holidays was great for your family also. First order of business is call of the roll. Would you handle that for us, Chris? I think everybody's here, actually.
Adam, if you want to just hand it to Gary. Oh, sorry, Gary, we're doing intermittent business here. We just need a signature. Okay, call of the roll. Supervisor Bauer. Here. Supervisor Headland.
Here.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Here.
Supervisor Prochnow.
Here.
Supervisor Morehouse.
Here.
Supervisor Vogel. Supervisor Calabrese.
Here.
Supervisor McCullough.
Here.
Chair McCullough. Supervisor Vice Chair Steen.
Here.
Supervisor Quinn.
Here.
Everyone is here.
Thank you so much. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes for the December 11th, 2024 meeting. What is the board's pleasure? Supervisor and supervisor, yeah, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion, explanation? Voice fell flash over.
I have a slight typo, police.
All right, we have a correction?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Calabrese.
Item number 4 in the last sentence, it says Chris Corpola provided a update on the Elk Creek Solar, and it should be an update.
Correction, so noted. Is the motion going to include the correction? All right. Any other things there from our English major, or are we all right? All right. Hearing nothing, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you very much. Next order of business is item 4, public comments. Do we have any public that wants to comment? All right, we will welcome no comments then. Thank you. Next order of business is the county manager's report. Chris, would you like to embark on that for us?
I will. I'm going to start just with a reminder that Friday afternoon from 1 to 3, we're doing a retirement coffee for Nick. It will be his last day on Saturday, but I don't think any of us will be here. And so we're just going to do that next door in room 54. If you wish to stop by and have some refreshments and wish Nick well on his way.
What time again, Chris?
1 to 3. Yep.
Please pass along my best wishes, as I will not be able to make it.
All right, we'll do so. So first item on the report is just a review of the agenda, county board draft agenda, and that basically mirrors what the agenda is for this meeting for the most part, outside of the fact that we will have one department annual report from the Transit Commission. So, yes, sir.
Can I make a request?
Yes.
Could we have a moment of silence at that point, beginning during communication for a fallen officer?
We certainly can.
Thank you.
Okay. Secondly, ERP procurement update. So we just met this afternoon prior to this meeting, a contract negotiation group. That's a smaller subset of the larger planning group. We have a meeting scheduled for the 23rd, I believe, 23rd of January with the vendors who've been selected. We have 2 primary vendors and then a potential supplemental piece from a third. They're not full ERP vendors. The full ERP vendor is a company that we're looking to contract with by the name of BS&A. And then the second is a company called Andrews, which would do a timekeeping piece of it. And then we already have a contract with NeoGov for our recruitment and onboarding. piece and then sort of integrating that into these systems as well. So I am very optimistic that we are right on schedule. And we will be talking about what our implementation timeline will look like and as soon as we have contract finalized.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, Chris, that I think you have done an absolutely fabulous bang up job on this. It's hard work, but you've really engaged the staff and it feels like all of the decisions have been well informed and well done.
Well, and I appreciate your comments. I really feel like I can take almost no credit. Yes, exactly, because KT Gallagher as a project manager and Tiffany as an assistant to that project have just done yeoman's work of pulling that off and holding us to schedule, and really just it's turned out so much better than I even ever anticipated that it would. So and then lastly, I put into your packet, just because I think it's noteworthy and interesting, a copy of the final sales tax revenue. So this, again, this is that 0.5% that the county charges on transactions within the county. And we get provided this update by our municipal advisor, PMA. And we finished out 2024 at $5.25 million of sales tax revenue. We budgeted 4.5 million. So it was $658,167 more than we budgeted. Part of that is, if you're looking at the graph, there was a big spike in February. We don't anticipate that we'll see that spike again. We were able to, so everything's, like super secret, but Dan and I had to sign non-disclosure agreements with the Department of Revenue in order to understand what that spike was, because it's not readily available knowledge as to where sales tax revenue is being paid by. But we don't anticipate that there will be that kind of spike in 2025. However, that being said, I think we budgeted $5 million in 2025, and that should be pretty much spot on if things continue as they continue. So.
Thank you. Well, I should say, any questions from the board for? Yes,
No, sorry.
yes, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, the county board agenda is missing the rezone for
Transfer station.
the transfer station. So just so you know, that will be on there.
Thank you. And
then lastly, I would invite Lynn Negaman to come up. She's just going to chat with you about an issue that we had with property taxes, or that she and her staff were instrumental in helping resolve with the Village of Ridgeland. But it was quite an ordeal on behalf of the work that Lynn and her staff did. It was not our error, but it had significant repercussions for the residents of the Village of Ridgeland.
Okay, so I think Dan has been helping with this. Chris, we've all been involved with this Village of Ridgeland issue that we became aware of on November 7th. What ended up happening in the little packet I provided you is a Department of Revenue explanation. It took a lot of hours, a lot of days to get to this resolution. But what ended up happening is tax bills are generated based on a bunch of numbers, and one of them being equalized value, which in the Village of Ridgeland, they have the Ridgeland value, and then they have a tax increment district. And over the course of the past few years, assessment reports were not being submitted to the Department of Revenue upon their deadlines and such. And so the biggest error occurred in 2023 when the Department of Revenue and the assessor had agreed to a modified or an adjusted rate value. That number didn't get carried forward to 2024, which caused a $15 million value correction in the tax increment district. And if you just took the original value of the calculated the net tax rate, it didn't look like it was going to impact the citizens quite as much as it did. The following documents are the tax increment districts, just so that you can see numbers in front of you because it makes a little bit more sense. In 2023, it shows in column E that the levy amount that is collected for just the TIF district is the 347,000. And then the tax increment amount was the 26,000. That is in column, the final column F. And then what happened in 2024, because of I should have probably pointed out column B is the equalized values on the 2023, which was at $20 million. Then we came forward to 2024 and that corrected value was reduced to $3 million. And as you can see, column E, our original tax bills, we were collecting over $200,000 more than we had the previous year. And Village of Ridgeland has like 225 tax bills. So you take that amount and you divvy it out, it's going to be a pretty significant increase. And then you notice the column F, the amounts were 26,000 and it went up to 491,000. And that's just a reflection of all of the taxing jurisdictions and how that affects them. So today we reprinted the modified tax bill after our meeting on Monday night with the Village of Ridgeland. The first letter was their resolution, meaning the Department of Revenue is loaning the Village of Ridgeland money for their general fund levy of $26,000. And so the final tax increment worksheet that I have in the packet shows Village of Ridgeland and their levy is normally about 35,000. It went down to 5,000 with plus the Department of Revenue loan is going to get them where they need to be for the year. And then column E is much closer to what the 2023 levy amount was. So in 23, it was 349,000 and now it's 351. And this helps the Village of Ridgeland and their taxpayers. However, it's not fixing the problem entirely. It'll be a future issue for multiple years to get all of the other jurisdictions. Village of Ridgeland will receive zero value for their tax increment district going forward, so they won't receive any more tax money. A tax increment district works that they're collecting 100% of all the tax dollars on any new construction that is in those parcels that are part of that, instead of the county always, getting their portion in the school and the CBTC. So they would normally get 100% of that because of the overtax is generally what it is this year. That increment will be zero, even if there is net new construction. And they'll work their way out in balancing that. So everybody gets as close to corrected as possible. The last 2 pages I provided in here is just to show you what the impact was on those few parcels. The original tax bills, I highlighted the net tax that we had printed the original tax bills for was $530,000. And then of course, we have our first dollar credit and the lottery credit. So it was 507,000. Today, fresh off the printer, is the new corrected sheet, which is the last page. And that amount that we're collecting from them now is 313,000 gross and then 290 net. So the taxpayers should be getting their new corrected tax bills here in the next few days, as I think they got them into the mail before the mail carrier came. We are in our office, this process this morning started with calculating the new tax bill. And then once we did that, that wiped out the old tax bills. And now Angela just finished before I walked down here, entering all the payments that we had received up until this point of reprint. And then we had to enter it. And I'm not sure. I think her refunds, I think total collected is 59,000 and refunds is 45,000. So we will be busily processing those in the next few days. But I think we got it done and as quickly
Yep.
as we could.
Many residents' tax bills doubled and or tripled.
Yeah, I think the biggest one we've seen was 328% increase. It was pretty busy in our office, as soon as those tax bills went out. It wasn't as busy as I expected it to be. We did have a list that, once we determined what the resolution was, we were back in touch with those people and letting them know. But surprisingly, there wasn't really any residents at the Village of Bridgeland meeting on Monday night, which completely shocked me.
I know. So the other thing that happened was the village did a reassessment this year. So some people just thought that their increased tax bill was related to their reassessment. But again, my kudos to Lynn. So this first came to our attention back in November. And Dan did some work and Lynn did some work and multiple entities reaching out to different entities from the state, the Department of Revenue, the Department of Division of Equalization, who even knew such things existed. But the bottom line to it was essentially the Department of Revenue was like, oh, it'll just fix itself. We're fairly convinced that no one understood what the impact was going to be until the tax bill's printed. And then saw the true impact. And so thankfully, the Department of Revenue did step in with the village to help them correct for the village residents. It does have an impact on the county taxes. Dan calculated out on his house, and it was about a $2 more impact that he is paying, and that will eventually rectify itself over the future years, but it'll take some years for that all to settle itself back out.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into that, but I mean, I think we're estimating 7 to 10 years of a correction period.
Thank you, Lynn. Does the board have any questions of Lynn?
No, just super happy to have it resolved.
Me too.
Yeah, Lynn, thank you
Thank
and
you.
your office so much for that work. And I think it's good that the county could help a level of government other than the county to get through their situation. So thank you and your team over there. Thank you
Yep.
very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you handled it with great grace and diligence.
Thank you.
That's all that I have.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Chris. Next order of business is number 6, reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from the executive committee, of which there are none. Number 7, review of reports, resolutions, and ordinance coming to the county board from the standing committees. 7A, planning, resource, and development, rezone transfer station property. Supervisor Quinn, would you like to address
Thank you,
that?
Mr. Chair. Well, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I think we talked about this before, but it's the committee, after consulting with the town as to what zoning designation they preferred, went ahead and recommended rezoning to general commercial, which fits the area and the needs of the town. So that's what'll be coming before the board.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Next is 7B, the facilities. Ms. Vogel, would you like to address that?
We're busy on Monday. So number one is the geothermal and solar project. So we reviewed the proposal from Verigy, which was the only proposal. And so we are recommending to award that performance contract.
Okay, takes care of 7B1. How about 7B2?
So B2 is the sale of the transfer station through a sealed bid process. So this is the coming to the board so that can all say yes or no before we actually go through the process. And 3 is similar. It's the 8 acres next to Oak Leaf Clinic. But that one is, a developer approached us, and so it's a negotiation to sell that piece of property, and we weren't quite sure whether we want to do that one or not, but we wanted to see what the board's feeling was for selling that piece of property.
So, thank you, Ann. And moving forward, there'll be action to be taken at the meeting, the county meeting, regarding 7B3. I think there'll be three um, routes of action that could be done. You could approve our management team to proceed on the negotiations, or you could say we feel that it should be out in a bid process, or you can do nothing at all. So those decisions will be made next Wednesday. Is there any questions of Ann on that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Supervisor
ahead.
Kinnear, yeah.
Thank you. I'm still just a little concerned, and I mentioned this last time, when it says preliminary approval to sell. When it comes to the board and we give it a preliminary approval, it's pretty hard to take it back. So I see in the one selling the transfer station, number 4 on that resolution says the county board reserves the right to reject any and all bids, et cetera. I like that. Can we have that in the other one too? In the other resolution?
I think that would be something we could decide, the full county board. Because this is the resolution going forward to negotiate it, but we could send it back maybe to the committee that it should be a bid process.
No, I think, I didn't explain it well enough. I would like to amend the resolution that we have right here to include the same thing that we have on the transfer station resolution. The county board reserves the right to reject. I'd like to make sure people understand, not just the board, but everybody understands that, hey, this is preliminary and the county board can reject it in the future.
I would speak to that, Supervisor Kinnear. And Dan, would you like to speak to that? I think that's an appropriate resolution to be made at the county board meeting. Amendment of the resolution.
Yeah, that would have to be done there. It can't be done now, but, and I think to your point, and I don't think it's lost on you, is it does have to come back to the county board, so that even that resolution would not allow the county manager to sell the land and sign off on it. It would have to come back to the county board to sign the final agreement. But yes, I agree, it's not written and not as clear, so
Yeah,
we can make
that's
that
the point.
amendment at that time.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Quinn?
Thank you. Just a follow-up. I'm wondering, it's hard to make a decision if we don't know what the discussion was in the committee. And so either, I appreciate that being on the table at some point in time.
So you're interested in,
Pros and cons.
so we had one voting against selling at all. We also discussed the possibility of changing it to, a bid process versus just negotiating with one developer, because maybe there are more developers that would be interested in this piece of property as well. We also discussed once we sell it, it's kind of out of our hands because it's owned by the city. And so they can, developer could say, we're going to do this, but then change their mind or resell it, or, so there's all those pieces. So, so we thought we would forward it the way it was written, just to get a feeling of whether the rest of the board is actually interested in selling at all, or if they're just gonna say, no, we don't want to sell it.
Yeah.
If I might, I know that one of the reasons that after we were approached, we had the discussion with which committee would look at it, and handing on to facilities was that the developer had approached us with an idea that was well within sort of the scope and idea of what we as a county want to be doing with public lands. So not necessarily, if we won't necessarily sell it, but I think it's very important that we keep any sale within the scope of things that we would like to see happening. And I think that at least initially, that people who approached us had something that's very much in that general sense.
Are you okay, Tom?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just hoping that there is some meat that the board can chew on to understand what the, why I mean, some sort of context for what we're doing, rather than just a resolution for the bid. And you could provide that, Anna. That'd be fine.
We can do a staff report too. We can work together and run a report out through you, Ann, before then, and then provide you some background and then some reasoning from the facilities committee meeting, if you would wish.
Can we share what the developers plan is? I don't
You
know.
can reach out and ask
Okay.
at first. I'm not sure. Difficulty would be, if you think about it from a business perspective, I, developer, have an idea. I think it would work well on this piece of property. Now, in a public meeting, my idea is shared and 6 other developers come to steal my idea. So not that I think that that's going to happen,
Yeah.
but that's the risk. So is that this particular entity had an initiative to reach out. They actually reached out to the city first, and the city suggested that they talk with us about this piece of property. But I think within that, we can provide some background information, work together, and we can run that by you, Ann, and then that can be shared for the meeting, just to give some background.
Does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Tom?
I think that'd be helpful. I mean, because part of what we're doing, and I think I agree, is we're sort of modeling a process for how we're going to make decisions about selling property. And so let's try and do it as clearly and as, the best discussion we possibly can have.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Procknow.
Did you want something first? Sure.
Well, go ahead, Randy.
Anyway, we talked about a lot of facilities. We do have an appraisal on the property. I mean, so we do know approximately what it's worth. It's not that hard to figure that out. As a board, we decided to move it on to the full board. Like I say, I still think it should be a developer's agreement, and I think they should have to technically build what they're proposing, and if not, it should fall through. And I don't know if we can put that in a contract or not, but that's up to legal counsel. And see how that would work, but I know other properties are sold with that same thing. Like I say, the board was kind of split on that, versus putting it out for bid, but vacant land is a little bit different than like the transfer station where there's buildings there and it's kind of, open bids are a little better on that. We know what the vacant land's worth. It's a highly valuable piece of property, great frontage. We just feel that we should again, if it doesn't work out with the developer and they don't come up with the money that we think it's worth, obviously this is going to get shot down at the full county board. So this is just a preliminary to see if we can negotiate with them to get something that we want and the price that we want. If we don't, then like I say, we reject it, the whole thing, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Supervisor Morehouse.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that we talked last time about sort of a process, thinking through a process for selling land. But this feels really kind of vague to me. So I guess I'm sort of piggybacking on Supervisor Quinn. What is it that the board what are our options on Wednesday? What is it that we are to do with this sort of vague thing?
If I may.
Yeah, please.
And Kelly, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, or anybody can if I'm wrong. Our options would be you could give the management team the okay to go ahead and pursue the negotiations. Or you could make a decision that you want to go to an open bid, or you could do nothing, or you could refer it back to committee for some fine tuning. My understanding of it, if we know what it's worth and whatever process we follow, if we don't get what we think it's worth, we don't have to accept it, because generally that's put in all your verbiage there that the county reserves the right to reject any and all bids if it doesn't, meet our criteria. So I think I'm correct on that. Have I overlooked some avenue there, Kelly? Supervisor McCullough?
No, I
mean?
think you got, I think you got that pretty solidly. I guess in relation to Diane's question, what I would say is the core of what the county board is going to be doing with this on Wednesday is, do we as a county simply not want to be interested in the sale of land? And if that's the case, then just shutting the process down before a bunch of work has gone into it? Or are we interested in cases where the sale of that land may serve other goals within the county? And I think those are the two main likelihoods. I don't think the board is going to come back and say, yeah, let's get rid of land as much as we can. So I think it's really mostly about, are we willing to part with land for purposes that are within keeping of the county's goals in general, and taking that to the board as a that's sort of the preliminary question.
Thank you, Chairman McCullough. Vice manager or sub-manager or second in command there, Mr. Dunbar, would you like to address this?
No, I think, I mean, I think Kelly, sorry, Supervisor McCullough, do that too, to cover that well. I mean, it's really a determination of whether we want to go forward with that sale and put the effort into looking at what is going to happen next, as opposed to what I wasn't interested in the first place. So why should we even look at it? I think we can provide, as Chris had brought up, we can provide a report that can get you a little bit more information, as opposed to, what are you going to get out of it, right? I mean, it's a sale of that land is not going to solve some major financial crisis or anything like that. It's truly a decision of, there is some land here that has value that somebody wants to do something with, and are you kind of in favor of parting with that land for that purpose? But I mean, not that we won't get money out of it, but it's not you're not going to build a highway shop with the money you get out of it. How's that?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is a very good discussion today, and I think it's something for the board to think about, the executive board and the board. I'm sure we might have a vigorous discussion next Wednesday. But I think Tom hit and Supervisor Quinn and Supervisor Morehouse hit on really we're laying a template on how we want to proceed on how we sell land, if we do sell land. And so I don't think we have one now, but we will when we get done with this, hopefully, and it will give future boards direction and how to handle these situations when they come up. Does that make sense? All right. Any other comment on this?
Just one clarification.
Yes, sir.
So-
Miss-
so far,
Supervisor Kinnear.
So far, what we have here is if we want to sell land, it goes to the facilities committee. Then it comes through here, but then it goes to the county board. And if it's approved to proceed, it would be negotiated. And then would it go back to the facilities committee or the county board? First,
Both.
the whole process, the facilities committee again, and then the county board. Okay, that sounds good. So in a way, what you just described, preliminary approval to sell the parcel, preliminary approval to explore selling the parcel is really what we're doing.
Yes, yeah.
Why don't we say it that way?
This is our first attempt at doing a preliminary approval.
Okay, that's-
We'll
I'm
get
done.
it
Thank you
next
very
time.
much.
Yeah.
No, and that's all right. Thank you for your comments. It's good to be cautious because we're in new territory, and I'm sure they'll amend the verbiage to meet with your approval, so.
And I was gonna say, someone has strong thoughts about wanting to amend the resolution to make a connection to Jim ahead of time so that he can help you to draft some language so that because, as you'll recall, amendments are to be presented in written form and you could do that ahead of the meeting. So if you want to add that condition for the rejection of any or all offers, as well as if you want to make it be bids or whatever, you can do that work with Jim ahead of time.
And if we wanted to change the agenda for the county board to say something like preliminary approval to explore the sale, can we do that right now?
Yep.
Is there an
Yeah.
objection to that, or is that, I want to talk to you because you guys thought through all this whole thing. And if that isn't good, I'll leave it.
No, that would make sense, and it would give people to know there's more steps. It's not a done deal.
Less vague that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah,
That word.
add, explore.
I think, any other discussion, questions, amendments? I think you were laser focused over there, Supervisor Kinnear. I think we got her. So moving on, next order of business is, 7C Broadband Task Force, C1 Resolution Endorsement of 24/7 Telecom for BEAD projects. I think, and also a resolution endorsement of Mosaic Technologies for BEAD projects. Would, county manager?
I would defer to Dan because he'll be able to explain it a lot better than I can, you know.
Okay,
I would too, because it's, we got colored maps and everything, so.
Oh, I don't have the colored map this time. So the BEAD is the federal grant program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment is what it stands for as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. So that program is $1.1 billion of funding to the state of Wisconsin to provide internet for everyone. So part of that process, as they've gone through that, the Public Service Commission has identified different locations throughout the state that are unserved, and they created what they call project units. We are now at the point where internet service providers that have already applied to the Public Service Commission, submitting a letter of intent, and that letter of intent required an approval that they were going to meet all of these requirements. So now these internet service providers are working to receive county endorsement for the work in those project units in your county. So that's part of the process. It's part of the grant proposal is they get 8 points for getting county endorsement for their work on those projects. So we were reached out, Mosaic had reached out to us about it's technically, I think, 5 project units in Hay River. However, it's one big clump that they are looking to pursue. And 24/7 had reached out, and they've also submitted that, though they don't necessarily have any target areas. They were the only other provider in the county that had submitted, and they were interested in looking at some areas in later rounds. So the Broadband Task Force had looked at those and chose to kind of geographically endorse. So everything north of Highway 170, we are endorsing for Mosaic Technologies. Everything south of Highway 170 is 24/7. And you may have seen the press release that one of the big pieces about that is, especially as it relates to 24/7, that area that Bloomer Broadband got a grant for was one that 24/7 might have applied for if that grant didn't go through, but everybody knew that that grant was pending at that point. So that has been taken care of, and 24/7's done some work. So really look at that one spot that Mosaic has applied for as being the last big spot in Dunn County, and once covered, there's 20 houses left. So, so anyway, this is the official endorsement of those, which gets 8 points for those providers as part of their grant proposal.
thank you, Dan. Does the board have any questions of Dan? Yes, and thank you. The write-up in the paper was great. I guess you're a TV star too, so that's good. appreciate your efforts on that. And I guess former supervisor Jim Anderson was ahead of his time on the broadband business,
Yeah.
I think, you know. He was a big supporter of that years ago. So kudos to everybody involved. Thank you very much.
And Jim is on our broadband task force, so
Yeah.
he's still involved.
He's still in there pitching. All
Yeah,
right. There we
so,
go. Yeah.
yeah.
First county in the state to say that we have pretty much, assuming everything goes through, that we'll have pretty much full coverage.
Uh, there's others that are pretty close. Most of them much more urban than us. But I think we're in a really good spot, and I think we've talked about this. We were very lucky in previous grant rounds, and I would say if you take the amount of land that we have and the population density in this county, we're up amongst our peers in those areas. We're well up beyond all of them. I mean, even I won't pick on a county, Chippewa. They have a lot more, like the map of project units is kind of looks like a rainbow. Their county looks like a rainbow. Ours is white, with just little dots on it. So
But I would add that I think that the commendation to the work of the broadband task force and Dan's leadership to that is the fact that we've had conversations about why a lot of that funding has flowed through the county. And I think once the Public Service Commission recognizes that the entities are working together
Mm.
and not at cross purposes, they're much more interested in working with us to accomplish it because it's a feather in their hat or a tick off of their box to be able to say, oh, hey, here's a rural county and they're done.
Yep. And I can't let this happen without, we have about 8 providers in Dunn County that are covering this. They're the ones that put up the money and take on all of the risk in doing that. We're very lucky to have 8 that were very dedicated to doing this. So there's a lot of them out there that they deserve a lot of the credit because they took a lot of the risk or are taking. So
Thank you, Dan.
I'd just like to say, Dan,
Yes, Bob.
excuse me, thank you,
Supervisor
Mr.
Bauer.
Vice Chair. I'd say Dan did a very good job on taking care of this committee and doing this from day one. I mean, I jumped in the middle of this because of the election, but I think Dan went over and above what he had to do this, so thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bauer. Any other
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Morehouse?
and not to in any way denigrate this fine work because it's really good, but I'm channeling Supervisor Calabrese on the third whereas from the bottom of the first page. The Dunn County BORAD of supervisors probably should be corrected.
right.
I'm taking lessons
Right.
from Supervisor Calabrese.
I'm blaming copy and paste. It's probably on both of them because yeah, there was samples from the public from. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. We'd like to thank both our English graduates for our lesson today. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Number 8, reports from the standing committees, Committee on Administration, Judiciary and Law, Health and Human Services, Facilities, Neighbors of Dunn County, Transit and Highway, Community Resources and Tourism, Broadband, Planning and Resources and Development. I'll start with Mr. Bauer there.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Supervisor Bauer.
Community Resources and Tourism met last month and we had a nice report from the UW Extension on the Farm Bill, what it attains to working with them, with their food and health stuff that they have to go through with their county and stuff, it all ties into the Farm Bill, the food wise and the farmers markets, and this all kind of comes together. They had a good explanation on all that. It really come out well. They hired a new employee, Deanne Wascala, has been hired as the replacement for Melissa Burke, who had moved on up to up north. I think she's up in Hayward somewhere up in that area. So things worked out well for them. She's already started, I believe, so we got to welcome her aboard. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bauer. Supervisor Headland.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. committee administration met, Thursday, December 12th. We kind of slipped that in between a council meeting and the end of November and our normal meeting date. And, thanks to Chris being flexible and I think that worked out well. At our meeting, we received presentations in writing from all the groups that report to us, Human Resources, Admin, Criminal Justice, Treasurer, IT, Corp Counsel, and the County Clerk. We had a very nice presentation by Dan Dunbar and coming on that broadband information, piggyback that a little bit. There were some funds needed to address some of these, again, to get those extra 8 points, or so to speak, or, where the county would show a little support, and it was just a little support in some cases. But anyway, we took that out of contingency money and were able to move that forward and not, slow up the very well-driven train at that point. Along with that, noted that our treasurer, and again, new treasurer this past year, went off for some, sound like some pretty intense training. There's a lot of topics that was covered in the 3-day session. And so glad to see that and see our staff continuing to improve the services they can deliver. Let's see, was there anything special? And then along with the other reports, there are some really good, interesting reports, even coming from our clerk, looking at some of the voting information that takes place in the county and with the number of people that voted at the last election last November. I find it pretty interesting to take a look at those numbers. Like to think that that might be the same going forward. Probably won't, but I would hope that it would be. And that ends my report. We are meeting the 4th Thursday of this month here in this room at 3:00.
Thank you, Supervisor Hedlund. Supervisor Kinnear?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The neighbors of Dunn County met way back December 12th. A few things. Brenda Osman worked there for 37 years and she retired, and just the beginning of this year, they had a little party for her. The CNA classes that they're holding right there in the central building are going fine. 8 of the 9 households are open. And Fireside is the 9th one, and we have some in there, and that's actually growing as far as the number of residents because we've got some more staff. In fact, let's see. Leading Age Wisconsin is an advocacy group that works to help skilled nursing facilities. And Carmen, our leader, is on the board there. And she's, I think, currently president of the Wisconsin Association for County Homes. So we've got really some say, and she's working really hard to do that kind of stuff. She would be here today, except they're having a survey of the West Building right this moment. So I imagine she's real busy. And we meet the 4th Thursday at 9:00 of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Prochnow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Highway and Transit met this morning. Transit, not much new there. Pretty much same old, nothing new on the electric buses. We're looking at trying to maybe do some advertisement on some of those buses to help cash flow transit a little better. Highway, I guess Dustin said they're busy snow plowing every day. So, but no, we haven't done any much snow plowing, so we've been out brushing all the roads again this year. We're going to be running out of brushing one of these years if it never snows. But we're pre-working on a lot of roads that we're going to be doing next year, brushing them all and getting those all cleaned up. Seeing what the culverts need to be replaced and all that good stuff. In the shop, they did get one truck all fabricated, so it's ready to go for service now. They're working on the other one, so that's a good thing going there. We did get the Project D, basically the Irvington Hill. That project's been let out. It's been awarded, so that'll be starting this summer. We're working on the County D or the County DG project built by Jake's. We need a little bit of land that we need to purchase out there yet for right away and stuff. Once that's done, we'll be starting that construction hopefully this summer too right away. Otherwise, that's pretty much for that. We meet next February 12th.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Quinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Planning, Research and Development Committee, I think our first meeting this month was on January 1st, so we skipped that. Our next meeting will be, and our only meeting this month will be next Wednesday. We have been pretty much doing business as usual. Had a significant number of variance requests for property owners that want to primarily with questions about access to their property. And so our discussions have basically ended up focusing on the ordinance that we follow, and the question of is there any, or if so, how much leeway does the committee have with regard to determining sort of the public interest questions of should we grant a variance for a driveway if the property doesn't meet the 4-to-1 ratio of access to a road. And we struggle with that. So, and we have 2 more variance requests coming up at our meeting next Wednesday. So we've asked Jim, with a little bit of help from Nick, to present to us or help us think through that question at our next meeting. And we'll see if we can become better supervisors by knowing more what we're doing. The other thing we had another presentation last month from Neil Cook regarding septic spreading of human sewage, septic on land, and ended up being a fairly long discussion. There was no real resolution to it. So the committee would like to, the committee is going to have a discussion about, based on the fact that in the past, we've done a groundwater task force. We've had some sensitive area mapping. Bob Colson did that. Neil Kokas helped with that. There's some new issues that have come up with regard to septic and PFAS. So after this presentation, we had a long discussion, and I think on Wednesday we'll look at that and say, what do we want to do with this? Do we want to explore it more? Is there a process we want to go through to explore it more? Or are we satisfied with, for example, the legislative resolution that we have on this issue? But just letting the committee kind of chew over what possible next steps are. So that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Calabrese?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. The Judiciary and Law Committee did not meet in December. I'd like to thank Supervisor Headland for requesting a moment of silence for Officer Reynolds. Appreciate that. The Traffic Safety and EMS Committee did meet on December 20th, and I don't know if everyone's aware of that committee. We meet 4 times a year, I believe. And if you all were aware of it and had attended, you would be very proud of the work there. It's each of the meetings we get reports from the State Patrol, the Menominee Police, the Dunn County Sheriff, all the EMS, the school buses in the county. It's a litany of people who give this report and share really important information about traffic safety and signage, and it's really awesome to be a part of. And so that was on the 20th, and the next one for that won't be until St. Patrick's Day time. The next Judiciary and Law Committee is January 27th.
Thank you Supervisor Calabrese. Supervisor Morehouse?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had no pressing business in December, and as it was close to Christmas, we all agreed that we would give ourselves a break. We meet again on the 23rd. We might be looking at a mental health resolution, and we're certainly going to be looking at, obviously we'll have 2 months of vouchers, and we're certainly going to be looking at environmental health fee structure this month. So I'm sure we'll have a pretty full agenda, but we gave everybody a Christmas break.
Thank you Supervisor Morehouse. I noticed you were looking at me when you said that mental health thing. Uh, Supervisor Vogel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Facilities Committee met on Monday, January 6th at 5 PM in this room. We did not have a fair board report, but Scott gave us a great facilities and parks report. There's a new judicial custodian and 2 new facilities workers that were hired. And he mentioned, and I think you've probably all seen the email about the Narcan in the fleet vehicles. And then we had a discussion. Dan Dunbar had spoken with Menominee Transportation, Oaklawn, the Highway Department, and so Supervisor Quinn should be happy. We decided to leave the east entrance open to the rec park for the winter. So, but but Menominee Transportation will try to keep their routes, the buses from going through on those roads, because they're really not meant for heavy transportation and vehicles. And then we discussed the 3 resolutions that we brought to the executive board. And our next meeting is January 22nd.
Thank you Supervisor Vogel. That concludes our report. Number 9, next meeting date, February 12th, 2025. Please put that in your phones, or in my case, I have a more up-to-date calendar. I resemble that remark. Having said that, then,
Same
We've-
time, 3:30, I'm sorry.
pardon?
Same time, 3:30.
Yep, to my knowledge, yes, same time. Yeah. That concludes our business today. Thank you all for coming, and we are now adjourned at 4:28 on my deluxe chronometer here. So, thank you all.
See y'all next week.